Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. So, as many of you already know, I just finished my first Dark Souls 3 playthrough last week. It was a blast, it was perfection from start to finish, 10 out of 10 game, a true masterpiece. And of course, I would be lying if I said that I understand completely everything that happened in the game. Like, no, I don't. So that's why we're gonna watch some lore videos together today and also later this week. So this week is a Dark Souls 3 lore week. So here we are, ready to go. So the first video is Vaatividya's lore of the main bosses, and I am super excited to see what he has to say. So let's go guys, and let's see.
The stories of Souls games have always revolved around bosses, but that statement has never been more true than for Dark Souls 3.
Okay.
If you understand who you're killing in this game, then you will understand the story.
I love
the
the
first one in
design.
your way is Udex Gundyr, the Ashen Judge.
What? Guys, how wrong I have pronounced that
you
word.
will understand the
I
story.
mean the name.
The first one in your way is Udex Gundyr, the
Udex Gundyr. Oh my god, I pronounced that so freaking wrong the entire playthrough.
Ashen Judge and scabbard to the coiled sword of the shrine. This sword is bequeathed only to chosen Ash who can best him in battle. But before he was the Ashen Judge, Gundyr walked through this place much like we did, on his way to meet his Firekeeper and link the fire. Charged with a duty and granted a cast iron halberd that would never crumble, Gundyr arrived, late, greeted by a shrine without fire and a bell that would not toll. The flame had already faded, and his Firekeeper had been thrown into the depths of the bell tower, grave of Firekeepers past.
I never went to that
She
place.
never met her champion, and the ensuing tragic farce became a favorite tale of the masses.
Oh yes, I never got that item, so it was the Firekeeper's clothes. That is actually something that I forgot to do, because I tried like a couple times to platform down there, but I died, so we forgot that one, but it's okay. It's okay.
And after he was bested by an unknown warrior, which is probably us, Gundyr the champion became sheathed to a coiled sword in the hopes that someday the first flame would be linked once more.
And it happened.
Perhaps Gundyr, with his unbreakable halberd, was fated to eternal service from the beginning. Since it's implied that
Yeah, the ending that I got, we linked the first flame, and it was truly beautiful. I really love that ending. I haven't seen the other endings just yet, because I am gonna do another playthrough, and I'm also gonna do a level 1 run probably after we beat Sekiro, so it's gonna be later this year.
Gundyr expected to meet a Firekeeper, he was likely meant as a candidate for linking the fire. Those capable of linking the fire are named Lords of Cinder, beings capable of bringing back the world from the brink of darkness by linking the first flame. Indeed, the game speaks of 3 Lords of Cinder who have already linked the fire, and they're being resurrected as a last resort to link it once again. In the opening cutscene, you saw them. Aldrich, Saint of the Deep, Yhorm the Giant, and Farron's Abyss Watchers.
I gotta say that when you see Yhorm the Giant in the cutscene, and when you meet him in the game as a boss, it was like, I don't want to say disappointing, because that's a bit too hard word. I was expecting a bit more from Yhorm the Giant, but it was a good, like a really cool design, and I love the fact that because we did Onion Knight's questline, we got to fight Yhorm the Giant with Onion Man, which was, I think it was very epic. And to see how Onion Knight just wanted to keep his promise to Yhorm, it was definitely my favorite questline probably in the game. Onion Knight was the hero in that fight. I did like absolutely nothing. So I was expecting a little bit more, but I'm happy. This is a perfect game.
Each of these lords once had an age of their own, and the remnants of their age lives on in Dark Souls 3 and in their resurrection. For example, Aldrich is linked to these bosses and their stories. The Abyss Watchers are linked here, and those in Lothric are conjoined here. For simplicity's sake, we're going to discuss these stories in 3 chunks, starting with Aldrich, Pontiff Sullivan, Vort, and the Dancer, who all reside in the Boreal Valley.
Yes, let's go.
The Boreal Valley is currently ruled over by Pontiff Sullivan, a tyrant who sends his Outrider Knights to serve as his watchful eyes and his guards.
Oh yeah.
And the first knight of Pontiff Sullivan we meet is Vort, an Outrider Knight who ambushes us as we attempt to leave Lothric. So the Outrider Knight's job is to keep an eye on things. Sullivan's knights are also described as his watchful eyes and his punitive blades.
Ward was actually such a cool boss, I think. And I don't know, when fighting wards and when the music really kicks in, I immediately knew that this game is gonna be so good. And it was.
Each Outrider Knight is provided with a ring by the Pontiff, which transforms them into frenzied beasts and lures them into battles of death.
True.
Specifically, the two main Outrider Knights we see upon the high wall of Lothric appear at both points of progression in the area, so perhaps they serve as strategically placed guards in order to hinder our progression, and for Sullivan to keep an eye on the world. When you went through Irithyll, I'm sure you noticed those ghosts that seem to be walking the streets. Well, they likely represent the Outrider Knights before their departure and descent into madness, because two in particular are very interesting. They walk together, one man, one female, and the woman wears the mask of the dancer.
Oh, true.
Vort was never far from the fleeting dancer, who watches over Emma in Lothric's Grand Cathedral. The dancer is far more intriguing than Vort is. The Pontiff ordered her to serve as a dancer, and then he ordered her to serve as his Outrider Knight. He bestowed enchanted swords upon her, one dark and one light, mirroring his own. Eventually,
the dancer was actually one of the bosses that was not that memorable for me for some reason. I know that people were expecting this fight, and many of you love this fight so much. And don't get me wrong, like visually it's stunning. The atmosphere is S tier in this fight. The OST is so beautiful, and I loved the echoing steps. I think that was a really cool design. But for some reason the fight itself was not that memorable. Everyone has their own experience with these bosses, and that is the magic of FromSoftware games. It was cool, don't get me wrong, yeah.
The black eyes of the Pontiff transformed her into a beastly creature, her gauntlets fusing with her own hide. The fascinating thing about the dancer, though, is who she was before she became Sullivan's pet. It's a very popular theory that she is one of the 3 daughters of Guinevere who appear in-game. Here's the evidence. Her Aurora Veil is said to be an article of the Old Gods, which is permitted only for direct descendants of the old royal family. The dancer's soul can also be transposed to give you the spell Soothing Sunlight, miracle of Guinevere of the old royalty. Guinevere used to reside in Anor Londo, home of the gods, and her line continues in Lothric. So Guinevere was also revered as a goddess of fertility and bounty. She raised many heavenly children, and the dancer, having one of the 3 sunlight spells, is clearly one of them.
Exciting, very exciting.
As
I didn't even realize
Pontiff
that.
Sullivan, the tyrant, now rules over Irithyll and Anor Londo, so it's my belief that Sullivan gained power within Anor Londo, then proclaimed himself Pontiff, and ordered Guinevere's daughter to serve as his dancer and then Outrider Knight. The royal family was usurped and devoured and torn apart by Sullivan, who, Yorshka says, wrongfully proclaimed himself Pontiff. Even after the family's passing, the Silver Knights looked over their manor and the ruined cathedral. The story behind Pontiff Sullivan's rise to power is told lightly, with only clues peeking above the surface.
Pontiff was such a cool boss, and I think he was the first real boss that really gave us some trouble. I don't remember how many times I died. I think it was 9 or 10. I love when you enter the arena and his swords light up, and it was very beautiful moment. But yes, then you realize that Pontiff Sullivan is actually a douche, like a real douche. And was it Pontiff who captured Gwyndolin and let Aldrich to devour him? I'm not quite sure. I think we will get some answers here. Yes, anyway, Pontiff, such a great fight. Freaking douche as a person.
Surface. But in a nutshell, I believe Pontiff Sullivan took over Anor Londo from within, probably with the help of the Deacons of the Deep. The only ones in his way were the Dark Moon Knights.
The Dark Moon Knights were once led by my elder brother, the Dark Sun Gwendolyn, but he was stricken by illness, and leadership of the Knights fell to me. Then Sullivan wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff and took me prisoner.
He's such a freaking douche. Like the biggest
So when I say that Pontiff Sullivan took over Anor Londo from within, it is speculation on my part, but my reasoning is that he knew of Gwendolyn, and he knew of Yorshka, and he wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff, which all imply that he was a part of the system already. A pontiff is essentially a high priest,
Holy shit,
and
how
the
cool
miracles,
is
the
that?
weaponry, and the rings of the Dark Moon all rely on faith. Additionally, there's a bit more evidence that the pontiff was a part of the Dark Moon system already. The sword in his left hand is a ceremonial sword representing the judgment of the moon. However, its magic is far closer to sorcery than any existing lunar power. Its dark blue hues, deeper than the darkest moon, reflect Sorcerer Sullivan's true nature. Yorshka calls Sullivan a tyrant, which can mean someone who elects themselves ruler without legal right. This, along with his great sword of judgment that references the moon, furthers that idea that he took over from within, the figurehead of a movement that was abandoning their faith in favor of Sullivan's true calling, dark sorceries. And the same sort of shift was happening amongst the Deacons of the Deep, who we find all throughout Anor Londo. Originally, though, they were a group of clergymen dedicated to sealing away the potential horrors of the Deep. Deep Protection tells us that the Deep was originally a peaceful and sacred place, its deacons wearing dark red robes denoting their blessing of fire. Over time, however, the Deep became the final rest for many abhorrent things. And indeed, human dregs were likely some of those things, as the dregs of humanity are said to sink to the lowest depths imaginable, forming the bedrock of the world. Those who linger too long on the brink of the deep will often slip, and lurking within the deep are insects which tear open the skin and burrow into flesh.
That sounds
Eventually, those dedicated to sealing away the horrors of the deep succumb to its very power. An example of this is their Tome of Knowledge, which was originally intended to teach divine protection, but it had dark tales at—
That was actually, I think... Okay, I'm just yapping about these bosses. My plan was to actually do Dark Souls boss tier list before the Elden Ring DLC comes out. Let's see if I'm able to do that. That is a very, very big and time-consuming project, but here we are apparently yapping about these bosses, and we will definitely talk about them more when we do the boss tier list. But anyway, Dark Souls 3 is still so fresh in my mind, so I have the need to talk about these bosses, but I think this boss fight was very, very enjoyable. Like, I usually do not enjoy gimmick fights, but for some reason I really, really enjoyed Deacons of the Deep. There was like nothing too crazy going on. You just smack the enemy that has the red aura, and I think the best way to do this fight was to just be like super aggressive. I think I died once because I was a bit too careful. Yeah, I think the curse killed me once. Very, very fun fight. Yeah, I did enjoy it a lot.
Added to its pages, making it a thing most profane.
Yeah.
And along with this descent, presumably, was Aldrich, Saint of the Deep.
That place is so beautiful.
And proper cleric. Only he developed a habit of devouring men. He ate so many that he bloated like a drowned pig.
It's freaking disgusting.
Then softened into sludge.
Yeah.
So they stuck him in the Cathedral of the Deep. And they made him a Lord of Cinder, not for virtue.
Think about that.
But for might.
Like, how can Aldrich, a freaking blob, be a Lord of Cinder? That is beyond me, but okay, I'll take it.
Aldrich was this simple saint who became a hugely powerful being, eventually chosen, maybe willingly and maybe not, to become a Lord of Cinder and link
so
the
weird.
fire.
That's so freaking
the
weird.
Deacon's skirt.
Like, think about Aldrich, the blob, the ultimate blob, linking the fire. Like, how is he doing
tells
that?
us that the deacons tended to the flame, and I'm
oh my god,
perhaps
so
inclined to
cool.
believe that this meant that maybe they were tending to the flame of Aldrich when he was a Lord of Cinder. And whether this is true or not, we do know that the deacons eventually succumbed to the horrors of the deep, and neither tending to the flame nor the faith could save them.
That arena is
You
so
would have
beautiful.
noticed that many deacons cast Dark Soul sorceries, which were imparted to them by Archdeacon MacDonald, an adherent of Aldrich who was largely responsible for the corruption of the deacons. Archdeacon MacDonald delighted
Oh my god. Oh, I'm sorry. I had to sneeze. Yeah, I had
in
to
the
sneeze.
cathedral's stagnating souls. For him, they represented the glorious bedrock of this world. Under the guidance of Archdeacon MacDonald, these deacons became both clergymen and sorcerers. The Archdeacon's sin, as it's called, was to channel faith for sorcery, which transformed his staff from a symbol of religious authority into a catalyst of dark sorceries. The deacons, they still had faith, but it was not in fire any longer.
Oh yeah.
It was in Aldrich, Saint of the Deep,
Okay.
their master.
Think
Upon
about
his
that.
resurrection, Aldrich, like
That
many
is-
Lords of Cinder, ruminated on the fading of the fire. For him, it inspired visions. He saw beyond the age of fire to the age of deep waters, and the coming age of the deep sea. Filled with new purpose, he knew what he had to do. He would devour the gods himself.
No
When we
way.
get to the Deacons of the Deep, we expect to find Aldrich in his coffin,
This
but
happening.
he's already left for his home in the Boreal Valley. The deacons here are led by Archdeacon Royce, who is one of the 3 archdeacons who remained behind to keep eternal watch over his master's coffin, hoping that one day he would return.
Okay.
Aldrich left behind a small doll in his
Oh,
coffin
yeah.
that Pontiff
With a
Sullivan
small doll you
gave
can
to his
enter
most
the
valued
ritual,
subjects.
I think.
Wherever
Yeah.
you go, the moon sets in Irithyll, wherever you may be.
That scene and that place, like Irithyll of the Boreal Valley, is definitely one of my favorite areas in the game. I can't say at this point if Irithyll is like my #1 favorite area in the game, but it was so beautiful and it was so Bloodborne-ish. I love this gothic architecture and these Bloodborne vibes, and like the cold blue color palette and the moon and everything. It was so beautiful. A very fun area to explore, minus the freaking sewers where are these spider thingies.
Irithyll.
Or Irithyll dungeons. No way. That
When
was
Aldrich left, Archdeacon
horrible.
MacDonald went with him. We come across
Holy
MacDonald in the depths of Anor Londo.
Oh yeah, it's that
and
one.
MacDonald, like many other deacons, is obese. He's huge, and I see that as a legacy of Aldrich, who derived power
Ooh.
from gluttony. They're clearly mimicking
True.
him.
Yeah.
In Anor Londo,
Oh my gosh, it's
Archdeacon
so freaking
MacDonald
creepy.
came to lead the Aldrich faithful, who are defenders, who exist to ensure that Aldrich, devourer of gods, remains undisturbed. And when we come across Aldrich, we realize why he wants to be undisturbed. Because Pontiff Sullivan, with a devourer of gods by his side, has imprisoned a god of
Yes.
the old royalty in the abandoned cathedral to be fed to the devourer.
This was such a mind-blowing moment in the game because of course if you have played the previous games, like, you realize that it's Gwyndolin. You see Gwyndolin's headpiece. He's shooting those what was those called? The arrows, Gwyndolin's arrows. Were they like holy arrows or sunlight arrows or some moon arrows? I don't remember. Anyway, yeah, it was nice to meet Gwendolyn after a long while, but then again, it's freaking disturbing. Like, I think this is one of the most disturbing plot twists in the whole franchise. And because Gwendolyn is the last small child of Gwyn, I think it's such a big thing, a very disturbing reveal.
Gwendolyn,
Yeah.
son of Gwyn and prior
Yeah.
leader of the Dark Moon Knights, was gradually devoured by Aldrich. As Aldrich slowly devoured the god of the Dark Moon, he dreamt. In this dream, he saw the form of a young, pale girl in hiding, and we know this is Yorshka, who was sister to Gwendolyn, and a half-breed who is parallel to Priscilla from Dark Souls 1. But the interesting thing about this is the dream that Aldrich had, because apparently Aldrich only needs to dream about someone to learn their skills, for he uses Priscilla's life hunt scythe in battle. And this fact that he can learn things through his visions has some interesting implications, because Aldrich is clearly wielding a Gravelord greatsword upon the end of his spear, which lends credit towards this theory that Aldrich has devoured Nito in some capacity, and he is called the Devourer of Gods, plural, after all.
I didn't even realize that.
So another question becomes, did Aldrich also devour Nito? Well, he has the wispy Nito-like cloak with skulls within it, but I think it's more likely that these skulls are just remnants of other humans that he's devoured. You have to remember there is no concrete evidence that he has devoured Nito, and I personally think it's more likely that he simply dreamt up the Gravelord spell in a similar manner to which he dreamt up the Life Hunt scythe from Yoshka.
That's freaking crazy.
But what you think shapes the story here, so let me know. So that's all of the Pontiff's lackeys explained for the most part, and the biggest unanswered questions here to go into in other videos is what exactly the relationship between Sullivan and the deacons is, and in what order this story of corruption and treachery played out, because timeline is always one of the hardest things to get right in the Soul series. But the biggest curiosity, in my opinion, and the one that really interests me, are Aldrich's visions of the age of the deep sea, from a being, remember, that has visions so accurate he can learn spells from those visions. So in a franchise that's entirely self-contained within this age of fire and its cycles, this vision of the deep sea, it's pretty much the only mention of a different future, and its appearance in these descriptions feels so out of place that I almost expect it to be referenced in the future in some capacity. Assuming it's not just a reference to Bloodborne, maybe this indicates what Miyazaki is doing next on one of his projects, or maybe we'll see something related to this in the DLC. Moving on. Something set Sullivan down this path. When Sullivan was a young sorcerer, he discovered the
Yeah, I think there was actually some talk on internet that some people really think that like the Dark Souls universe and Bloodborne is somehow connected. I don't know if I myself believe that. Of course, I don't understand the lore that deeply, so I cannot really say. I think that's a very interesting view, but let me know in the comments, what do you think? Are these worlds somehow connected, or are there like totally separate worlds?
Profaned capital, and down there he discovered an unfading flame below a distant tundra of Irithyll, and when he found this, a burning ambition took root within him. The profaned flame. The origins of it aren't known, but we do know a few things. We know it's an unfading flame,
so annoying.
We know that it can be manipulated, and we know that it swallows the hearts of those who wield it.
Brings back memories.
Pontiff
from
himself imbued
dungeons.
his greatsword with this fire, and he also gave it to his holy knights. Shortly after he did this, the fire witches had their hearts swallowed by the flame. And as one last example of its corrupting influence, the handmaidens who wield it down in the profaned capital, their dagger says that they take pleasure in wounding others, and of course the Pontiff himself doesn't exactly have a very good moral compass. But apart from that, we know precious little about the profaned flame, and this has been the hardest part of the script to write for me, because the profaned flame defies all categorization as flames that have existed previously in the series. So I'm going to work on my theories on it, and while I'm doing that I'll list those theories in the description, because I could talk about this thing for a very long time without actually getting anywhere. But the final thing, and maybe the most important thing we know about the profaned flame, is that Yorm the Giant became a Lord of Cinder to put it to rest. Now, clearly, Yorm was not successful, because the profaned flame has infiltrated almost all of Irithyll and set a lot of events in motion. This just adds even more tragedy to Yorm's tale. Yorm is the descendant of an ancient conqueror, and was asked by the very people once subjugated to lead them, serving as both a weighty blade and a stone-hard shield. Yorm fought unflinchingly as a one-man vanguard, but one day he lost the one he wished to protect. In response, he threw down his great shield and added a left-handed notch to his machete instead, so he could two-hand it, for he no longer had anything left to protect. all the while.
Yeah, from Onion Knight's questline, you really realize that that Yorm is actually, apparently, a very tragic character, and his fate is like dark. I think it was very cool that it was tied with Onion Knight, and that they had this very like special relationship. Yeah, I think that was very wholesome, and the fight itself was not very tough, of course, because we were fighting with the Onion guy. The Onion guy really brought Yorm the Giant to his knees, and he kept his promise, and he died, and it was sad, but that's how things go in FromSoftware games. Like, you can't have any friends in these games, really. Everyone just dies.
While his human subjects appeared quite disrespectful of him, they were insincere when they called him a lord, and they doubted him. He is called Lonely Yorm in his cinders, and perhaps that's because he lost the one he wished to protect.
That's so sad.
Or perhaps because he didn't have the love of his people. At some point, the profaned flame became a real problem in the capital, for according to his cinders, Yorm decided to sacrifice himself and become a Lord of Cinder to put the profaned flame to rest. I don't know why Yorm decided that, hey, I'm gonna put out fire with fire, because when he did this, fire rained down from the sky and incinerated naught but human flesh. This is an interesting insight into who the linking of the fire consumes. It consumed humans, and humans alone, and you see their disfigured, smelted corpses all around Yorm's chamber.
We did link the fire.
Before he linked the fire, however, Yorm left behind 2 Storm Rulers, which was a legendary greatsword, also known as the Giant Slayer, for the residual strength of storm that brings giants to their knees. So this thing could kill giants, and one he gave to the humans who doubted him. He called them out on their cowardly words and gave them a weapon capable of killing him. And the other Storm Ruler he gave to a dear friend in return for a promise. This dear friend was Sigurd, who journeys to the profaned capital in order to uphold his promise and slay
was
his
so
old
emotional.
friend. Presumably, Yorm asked Sigurd to kill him if he ever betrayed his duty, and Sigurd does so, seeing that Yorm has not returned to link the fire once again. The profaned capital also had its sorcerers, who claimed heirship to the legacy of the renowned scholar Big Hat Logan, even going so far as to emulate the type of staff
that guy was
used.
pain.
But halfway across the world, I know of 2 crystal sages who emulated him even more closely. These crystal sages served as spiritual guides to the scholars of Lothric's Grand Archives, and one of them went on to ally with the Undead Legion. The Undead Legion of Farron was a caravan of undead, dedicated to the eradication of the Abyss wherever it was found. The Abyss Watchers, as they were called, follow the duty and the form of the Wolf Knight of Dark Souls 1, known as Artorias the Abyss Walker. They are essentially his legacy. They made their home in Farron Keep, and high above—
There's actually so much fan service in this game. I read some comments that some people might not like that how much there actually is fan service in the last part in Dark Souls 3, but I really did enjoy it. We did play all the games. We played Dark Souls 1, we played Dark Souls 2. I think those were one of the best moments in the game when you make those ties and find things from previous games. Yeah, I really did enjoy that. I love that there's Onion Knight, there's patches, even though I freaking hate patches. And like when you realize that you're actually in Anor Londo, when you see Gwyndolin, when you read about Artorias, and when you actually get the armor set of Artorias, I used the shit out of that armor. And yes, there's also so much stuff from Dark Souls 2 that I really appreciate. I'm so happy that I played Dark Souls 2. I got so many comments that I should not play that game, that it's so freaking bad, and I really enjoyed Dark Souls 2. If you have followed my playthroughs, I freaking love that game. I'm so happy that we played the whole trilogy. And of course, one of the biggest moments was, like biggest fan service moments, was when you fight the Soul of Cinder, and in the second phase you realize that he's actually like Gwyn. The Gwyn's theme kicks in and he has these movesets, like Gwyn's movesets. That was one of the most memorable moments in this game, for real. If the Gwyn's theme kicking in doesn't make you emotional, what makes? That was amazing moment.
Above
in
Farron
the
Keep
game.
lies an emaciated old wolf.
Yeah.
The Abyss Watchers, for their hunting of the Abyss, they required some art that went beyond any existing art. Wolf's Blood, the legacy of Artorias, provided just that.
So freaking cool.
Their pointed steel helm became shirked as this sinister omen by the masses.
Those are actually
because,
very Bloodborne-ish
think about it, if you saw that pointed
characters.
steel helmet coming towards your
Yeah.
kingdom, you knew you were in trouble, because these guys are dedicated to taking out the Abyss. And indeed, their home in Farron might just be set above such a kingdom, for below are the catacombs of Carthus, and sealed within a goblet, deep below in the catacombs,
that was
is the
Wolnir.
encounter with High Lord Wolnir,
That was so
a ruler
cool.
who succumbed to the Abyss.
Yeah.
Before
yeah.
succumbing to the Abyss, Wolnir was a conqueror. He ruled over the people of Carthus of the Sands, formidable warriors who were masters of the curved sword, and also of pyromancies that enhanced the effectiveness of their curved swords. The swordsmen attached great value to victory at all costs, for where was the honor in death? They lived for their High Lord Wolnir, who was conqueror of most lands known to their people, and yeah, you can see why they loved him. In Wolnir's time, there were other lords who had their crowns rightfully bequeathed upon
That
them,
boss is
but
so
Wolnir
cool.
brought them to
So
their
cool.
knees and
And-
ground their
You know, when... I'm sorry I'm pausing so much. But yes, you know, I love yapping. I think it was stunning moment when you kill Wolnir and he's kind of like dragged down, like back into the abyss, into the darkness. That was like freaking cool moment.
crowns to
I
dust,
think.
forming his own crown from theirs,
Yeah.
for he was the one High Lord, keen to outlive all others. Reminds me a lot of what we did in Dark Souls 2. Anyway, somehow Wolnir himself fell to the abyss, and he was gripped by this fear of true
I
darkness,
love that boss.
and he pleaded to the gods for the first time. In our boss fight with him, there is a darkness below Wolnir,
Yeah.
and it's struggling to consume him. But Wolnir had his holy sword, and he had 3 armlets which he had stripped from the corpses of clerics,
So
and
freaking
these
beautiful.
things gave him some semblance of comfort. Of course, we destroy the bracelets, and the abyss finally consumes him.
Yeah. That
While
moment.
he was in the abyss, however, Wolnir was not inactive. Black Serpent is this pyromancy that was discovered from
Those
the
guys
abyss
were
by
pain in my
Wolnir,
butt.
which went on
I
to
swear.
inspire the black arts of his Grave Wardens. The Grave Warden Pyromancy Tome was developed by his Grave Wardens who discovered his pyromancies.
Oh.
And going back up for a second,
Did I ever
Wolnir
find
and
that?
the Abyss, their proximity to the Abyss Watchers
I
probably
don't know.
isn't coincidence. In fact, it makes quite a lot of sense for Carthus to be one of the kingdoms that the Abyss Watchers toppled. So let's go back up to the Abyss Watchers for a second and
Mm-hmm.
see if this theory holds any weight. Eventually, the Abyss Watchers became Lords of Cinder. Their shared wolf's blood served their mandate as lords.
There's
Essentially,
quite
it
many
met the requirements.
of those.
To gain access to the Abyss Watchers, you have to extinguish 3 flames, and I always wondered why this ritual existed. It felt very video gamey and out of place, but I went
True.
through once
I
more
agree.
recently, and I looked really closely at the engravings behind each flame. One looks like the 4 kings, one looks like Nito, and one looks like the Bed of Chaos, 3 of the main
Dude.
lords in Dark Souls 1, and these were the souls you had to collect to gain access to Gwyn and open a giant stone door. So these are likely here to symbolize that, right? We're extinguishing 3 flames and we're opening the door that explains the ritual.
That's freaking crazy.
Anyway, that's more a piece of trivia than anything. After the
Yeah.
Legion's Watchers became Lords of Cinder, the wolf blood dried up, and Farron was consumed by a festering wood. Dark wraiths began to roam, the keep fell to ruins, and as suggested by many of you in my
Yeah.
lore through,
Also, the dark rays from Dark Souls 1. I think it was very neat to see those in this game too. There's just so much stuff from the previous games, and I freaking love that. I love that.
the Abyss Watchers, upon being resurrected to link the fire once more, may have been affected by the Abyss as well. So here's the theory. The Abyss Watchers were driven to seek out the Abyss, right? Well, what if, Upon their resurrection, the Abyss far below in the catacombs of Karthus crept into the Abyss Watchers themselves. This would explain why the Abyss Watchers are locked into endless combat with themselves, because they're driven to seek out the Abyss, but they also can't die, so they're locked into endless combat. When I read this theory in the comments, something else clicked as well. The Wolf Knight armor, which belonged to Artorias, who fell to the Abyss, says that the armor of the Abyss Watchers suggests their own eventual end. So
that's actually
the game is drawing a parallel here between Artorias and the Abyss Watchers. It's saying that the armor of the Abyss Watchers shows that they're falling to the Abyss as well. And here's the really interesting thing. When you look closely at their armor, you realize it has black tendrils of the Abyss rising up. So the armor is showing us that they fell to the Abyss. Probably. This theory isn't concrete, and no one should take it as such, but I think it's the best explanation for their infighting. It's my favorite explanation, anyway. And mostly, this one was all you guys, so thank you. Onwards to Lothric.
Yes.
The Knights of Lothric were hunters of dragons, explaining their affinity with lightning
might actually be my favorite area in the game.
Sun. They have since tamed dragons, and with their drakes, they once crushed anything that threatened their shores. The knight has served as one of the 3 pillars of Lothric since ancient times,
those knights.
And it shares place alongside the wyverns as a symbol of Lothric. However, tales of dragon slayers are now a rare thing, and they're told only in fragments and whispers in remote regions. The Dragon Slayer armor lost its master long ago, but it still remembers the sporting hunts they shared together.
Yeah.
When we fight against it, the armor retains its master's fighting style, but now it has a new master, the Pilgrim Butterfly.
I freaking love that fight.
Now, the soul of the Dragon Slayer armor is the only mention of these butterfly creatures, so...
Hey, it's actually very cool to see those like up close, because I was wondering that. I want to see how they actually look like. Very, very interesting design. I love that fight, the boss fight, the Dragon Slayer armor. It was so
speculation abounds whenever you talk about them. When you look up at them closely though, closer than the game intends you to ever get, you'll see that they're flesh and bone, and they're almost bent backwards with a ribcage jutting outwards. Now, their name is one of the biggest clues that we have, and the word pilgrim makes me think of the pilgrims of Londor, who all died on their way to the peak of Lothric. And just like these pilgrim butterflies fly upwards to the peak of Lothric as well. And in both these cases, with the pilgrims and the pilgrim butterflies, we have no real idea why either of them are going up. So perhaps we'll learn more if we ever get Londor-themed DLC, and I think that's pretty likely.
There's so much more gross than I realized in the game.
I'm going to list 2 other theories in the description about the butterflies, because the bottom line is we don't know what they are. Next is the Archives, and beyond the Archives is Prince Lothric and his brother, Lorien. Curiously, these are the only Lords of Cinder who were not featured in the opening cutscene of Lords being resurrected. And I believe that's because they never linked the fire. And I think their rejection of linking the fire might have been what set all of the desperate resurrections into motion. This is just a theory, but I think it's backed up by most of these descriptions and this dialogue.
Prince Lothric is in your hands. Please save his soul. Tell him what he must be, a lord.
So, there's Prince Lothric and Lorien, his brother. Lorien is the eldest, and before he was crippled, he was a knight who single-handedly slayed a demon prince. The victory, eternally scorching.
That was so cool to realize, because the pilgrim in Dragheap was talking about how there is this giant hole where this demon resides, and you realize that's the demon who Lorien fought and apparently lost his legs or his ability to walk. This was in my top 3 favorite bosses in this game. And the cutscene where Lothric resurrects Lorien and enters a fight with him was one of my favorite cutscenes in this game. And Lothric's words during that cutscene, "Rise if you would, for that is our curse," that really sent chills down my spine. Dude, this game is just so freaking good. It's just so freaking good. And the fight was very fun. I enjoyed it.
With flame. The Cinders of a Lord state that the Lothric bloodline was obsessed with creating a worthy heir.
Yeah.
They needed someone to link the flame, and for some reason Prince Lorien did not suffice. So they put their faith in their next born, Prince Lothric, as his throne states, last hope of his line.
Yeah. Really
Prince
sad.
Lothric, destined to be a Lord of Cinder, was born into swaddling clothes used in ancient prayer, and they are all that he has ever worn. He was cherished by the royal family, despite being born into illness, a frail and shriveled child. He was their last hope, and meant to be a champion, but some things will remain distant dreams forever.
That's so
Linking the
sad.
fire proved impossible, so the family resorted to unspeakable means. Descriptions don't say or imply what these unspeakable means are, so that's up to us to guess at. But after mentioning these unspeakable means, the Cinder description goes on to say that the path to linking the fire is a cursed one indeed. So Prince Lothric was cursed. With what, we don't know, but Lorien embraced his brother's curse, leaving him mute and crippled. It is said that Lorien, the one who embraced the curse, did so willingly and embraced his fate. When we kill Lorien in the boss fight, Lothric resurrects him, saying, "For that is our curse."
Yeah.
So maybe being unable to die itself
Such a
is
cool
the
moment.
fire-linking
Such a
curse,
cool freeing
and why
moment.
he says,
You remain among the accursed.
after becoming one, the soul of the twin princes says that they rejected their duty to become lords of Cinder and settled down far, far away to watch the fire fade from a distance. The curse has made their souls nearly inseparable. So, why did Lothric grow to despise and reject his duty as a Lord of Cinder? Well, it's very likely due to a man named as the First of the Scholars. Soulstream says that he was alleged to be a private mentor of the royal prince, and that he doubted the linking of the fire. So it's very likely that this scholar was the one who made Lothric reject his fate as a Lord of Cinder. And there is so much more to the tale of Lothric, but we don't have time. I want to talk about the kingdom, about the royal family, but this video is only about the main bosses, so I still have to mention Osiris, King of Lothric, and his wife, the Queen, so please subscribe and look out for the optional bosses lore video. And the final main boss, the being we fight after the Firekeeper chastises the lords for going without thrones, is the soul of Cinder itself, located within the kiln of the first flame. The soul of Cinder is actually a fairly easy being to explain. Ever since Lord Gwyn, the first Lord of Cinder, many exalted lords have linked the first flame, and it is their very souls that have manifested themselves.
And actually when I was editing the video, the last part, I realized that that is the coiled sword from the bonfire, and I actually got some comments also about that. And that is very, very interesting, and that's actually a weapon that I really want to use in my next playthrough. And I got so much comments that I should kill the Soul of Cinder for entering the DLCs, but I really wanted to wrap up this playthrough by killing the last boss of the main game. And I'm so happy that I did that. I think that was the perfect grand finale. I think Soul of Cinder is the perfect last boss.
As defender of the flame. The Soul of Cinder is their deific
I freaking love
manifestation.
that cape.
More specifically, it's clear that the Soul of Cinder is this conglomerate of players themselves, us from previous games and cycles who have linked the fire. Using the ninja flip ring from Dark Souls 1, curved swords, pyromancies, sorceries, miracles, and in Phase 2, the music shifts to this twisted tribute of Gwyn's theme as he takes on the First Lord's fighting style. The kiln also, it represents the state of the world if you look behind you. It's a city twisted and distorted and folded in on itself, just like the entire game and bosses we just journeyed through. Dark Souls 3 contains the histories, the people, and the lands of the Abyss Watcher's age, of the Pontiff and Aldrich's age, of Yorm's age, and the story of Lothric that literally seems to have called forth old lords of Cinder to link the fire once again. And as you stand in front of the flame, four choices lay before you, more than any previous game. But that's a video and a story for another time, for this video is far too long already, and judging by my analytics for videos like this, only half of the people who started watching this video will still be watching now. So to you guys, thank you for sticking it through. This video took a really long time to make.
Wow, I feel like that went so fast. It's so interesting to learn more about these bosses, characters, events. And let me know down in the comments if you want to see the video about the optional bosses. There was, for example, Osiris. Osiris was such a big thing for me for some reason. I heard that many people really don't enjoy that fight so much, but I enjoyed it, and the character, the setting, how he speaks during the boss fight, it was so good, and I definitely want to learn more about Osiris. So I will definitely watch it here if you want to see it with me, but if you're not interested, then I will watch it on my own. As I said, this week is dedicated for Dark Souls 3 lore, and there's actually one video that I got many requests to watch here on my channel. I think it was called Happy Souls? Was it Happy Souls? If you wanna see that with me, let me know. We will definitely watch it together. Apparently it was not like a lore video, but more like just something fun. I don't know. But yes, so let me know in the comments, what do you want to watch with me this week? And I try my best to get the boss tier list, like the ultimate Dark Souls boss tier list, on YouTube before the Elden Ring DLC comes out. But yes, it is a big project, and in a couple of weeks we will start the Elden Ring DLC. It's gonna be the highlight on my channel because Elden Ring is my favorite game of all time. Without Elden Ring, I probably wouldn't have started my YouTube channel. It's such an important game for me, and I'm so happy. I am so happy that we can play the DLC here together on my channel. I hope you enjoyed. Leave me your thoughts down below. Drop a like, join my Discord if you haven't already. It was super nice to have a little lore moment with you guys. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your day, and I will see you in the next one.